You walk into a museum and stop in front of a stone the size of your thumbnail. There's a carving on it, a strange horned animal, a few symbols above its head. You lean in, waiting for the placard to tell you what it means. It doesn't. Nobody knows. But the real answer is far stranger than any placard could tell you, because this tiny stone belongs to one of the largest civilizations that ever existed. And after 100 years of trying, no one has been able to read a single word it left behind. You've probably heard of ancient Egypt. You've probably heard of Mesopotamia. Both of them wrote things down, and both of them eventually got translated because someone found a bridge between their language and one we already knew. Egypt had the Rosetta Stone. Mesopotamia had bilingual inscriptions carved by kings who wanted everyone forever to understand what they'd done. The Indus Valley Civilization had no such bridge. It stretched across what is now Pakistan and northwest India, larger in land area than Egypt and Mesopotamia combined. And it built cities with covered drains, standardized brick sizes, and public water systems centuries before Rome existed. Then it vanished into silence. Its script, found on thousands of small stone seals, has never been matched to any known language. Not once. Not fully. Think about what that means. You can walk through the ruins of Mohenjo-daro today and see homes with private bathrooms connected to a citywide sewage system. You can see granaries, marketplaces, wells on nearly every street. Whoever planned this had ideas about order, cleanliness, and shared living that took thought and enforcement to build. But you cannot ask them why. You cannot read their prayers. You cannot read their laws if they had any. Everything you know about what they believed has to be guessed from objects, not words. Doesn't that feel backwards? Start with the animal on that seal. It shows up again and again, more than any other image the Indus people carved. A creature with one long horn, a strange collar, and a small object standing in front of it like an offering stand. Scholars have called it a unicorn for over a century, though most think it was probably a stylized bull shown from the side so only one horn appears. Nobody agrees on what it represented. A clan symbol, a deity, a trading guild's mark, like a corporate logo stamped onto goods moving through a Bronze Age supply chain. The seals were small enough to carry, and many think they were pressed into clay to mark ownership of trade shipments, the same way you might sign a delivery slip today. But if that's all they were, why carve them with such care? Why give an ordinary bull a single horn and a posture found almost nowhere else on Earth? Then there's the figure that changed the whole conversation. Archaeologists digging at Mohenjo-daro pulled out a small seal showing a seated figure with legs folded, arms covered in bangles, and what looks like horns rising from a headdress. Around the figure sit a tiger, an elephant, a rhinoceros, a buffalo, and what appears to be deer beneath the seat. Some scholars have argued this figure resembles Pashupati, an aspect of the Hindu god Shiva known as Lord of the Animals, suggesting an early root of a religious tradition that would still be alive 4,000 years later. Other scholars push back hard on that reading, warning that projecting a much later religion onto a civilization that left no readable text is exactly the kind of guessing that gets archaeology into trouble. The truth is, both sides may be partly right, and neither can prove it. That's not a failure of research. That's just what happens when the only witness left behind is silent. Gregory Posil, an archaeologist who spent decades studying the Indus civilization at the University of Pennsylvania, once summed up the state of the script bluntly, saying that most attempts to translate it amount to little more than speculation dressed up as certainty. That's a striking thing to hear from someone who devoted his career to this culture. It tells you something about how careful real scholars have learned to be here after generations of confident claims collapsed under scrutiny. And the Finnish linguist Asko Parpola, who has spent over 50 years cataloging every known Indus seal and inscription, has argued the script likely encoded an early Dravidian language based on patterns in how symbols repeat and combine. His work is respected. It's also unproven. No inscription has ever appeared alongside a translation in a language we already understand, and without that, even the most careful pattern analysis stays a hypothesis, not a decoded message. Here's where the story gets stranger. Unlike Egypt, with its towering pyramids built for god-kings, or Mesopotamia, with its ziggurats stacked in honor of named deities, the Indus cities show no obvious temples, no monumental tombs, no statues of rulers carved 20 feet tall to remind everyone who was in charge. Instead, the most elaborate structure ever found is a sunken pool at Mohenjo-daro, lined with waterproof brick and precise drainage, now called the Great Bath. Some researchers believe it served a ritual purpose, a place for purification linked to belief, not just hygiene. Others think it was simply a public gathering space. But notice what's missing. No throne room, no royal palace clearly identified, no inscriptions bragging about conquest, the way nearly every other early civilization loved to do. If the Indus people worshipped kings, they left almost no evidence of it. If they worshipped gods, the evidence is scattered across tiny clay figurines and seals instead of grand temples reaching toward the sky. There's another silence worth noticing here, too. Dig through Indus sites, and you'll struggle to find what nearly every other Bronze Age civilization left behind in abundance: weapons of war. No mass graves showing signs of battle. No fortified palaces bristling with defenses against invading armies. No triumphant carvings of a ruler standing over defeated enemies, the kind Egypt and Mesopotamia produced constantly. Some archaeologists take this as evidence of a genuinely peaceful society, one that settled disputes and organized labor without needing to glorify violence. Others are more cautious, pointing out that absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence, and that 4,000 years underground can erode a lot of what once existed. Still, the pattern holds across site after site. Whatever kept order in these cities, it doesn't look like it came primarily from the threat of the sword. That absence is the twist worth sitting with. You'd expect a civilization spanning over 1 million square kilometers, with cities holding tens of thousands of people, to need a visible hierarchy carved in stone to hold it together. Instead, what held the Indus world together might have been something quieter: standardized weights, found from one end of the civilization to the other, identical almost to the gram. Brick sizes kept consistent across cities, separated by hundreds of miles. A script used the same way on tiny seals from the coast to the mountains. It's possible their order wasn't built on the fear of a god-king. It's possible it was built on shared agreement enforced through trade, ritual, and daily habit rather than armies and inscriptions bragging about who won which war. Nisha Yadav, a researcher at the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research who has spent nearly 20 years analyzing the Indus script structure, has pointed out that after all this study, not a single sign has been definitively read. 20 years. One of the most careful research efforts in the field. And still, no translation. That's not because no one is trying hard enough. It's because the puzzle may be genuinely unsolvable with what survives. So, what did they believe? You're left piecing it together the way an archaeologist would, from fragments instead of sentences. A mother goddess guessed from hundreds of small terracotta figurines shaped like women, with wide hips and elaborate headdresses, found in homes across nearly every Indus city, suggesting a belief tied to fertility, growth, and the earth itself. A reverence for water, guessed from the sheer engineering poured into baths, wells, and drains, present in nearly every house regardless of size. A respect for animals guessed from how often bulls, elephants, and that strange unicorn-like creature appear on seals, meant to be carried close to the body. None of these are certainties. All of them are inferences built the same way you'd guess what someone believes, by watching what they build, what they carry, and what they repeat, rather than what they say out loud. You can even trace how far their beliefs and goods traveled without a single readable sentence surviving the trip. Cylinder seals from Mesopotamia have turned up buried in Indus cities, and Indus seals have turned up thousands of miles away in Mesopotamian sites. Proof that ships and caravans carried goods, and probably ideas, between these two worlds long before anyone wrote a treaty about it. Merchants in cities like Ur likely handled objects carved by people who worshipped that unicorn-like creature without ever fully understanding what it meant. The same way you might own a piece of art from a culture you've never visited and never quite grasp what it meant to the person who made it. That's the strange intimacy of trade. Objects cross borders long before understanding does, and sometimes understanding never catches up at all. And maybe that's the part that should sit with you longest. You do the exact same thing every day. You don't walk around narrating your beliefs to strangers. You show them in the objects you keep near you, in the spaces you keep clean without thinking about why, in the small symbols you carry on your phone, your keys, your jewelry, that mean something to you and nothing to someone from outside your life. If your entire civilization vanished tomorrow and someone dug through what was left in 4,000 years, they wouldn't find your diary. They'd find your habits, fossilized into objects, exactly the way archaeologists are still staring at a horned animal on a thumbnail-sized stone, trying to hear a voice that stopped speaking a very long time ago. In 2025, an Indian state government even offered a public reward exceeding $1 million to anyone who could finally crack the code, a sign of how much the silence still bothers people 4,000 years later. Maybe it will happen. Maybe some overlooked inscription, some bilingual fragment buried under a city that hasn't been excavated yet, will finally hand researchers the bridge Egypt and Mesopotamia got for free. Until then, the Indus Valley remains one of history's most advanced civilizations, run by people whose plumbing you can still study, whose cities you can still walk, and whose deepest beliefs you can only guess at, one silent seal at a time. You walk out of the museum past that same thumbnail-sized stone, and this time you don't just glance at it. You look for a long moment at the horned creature staring back at you, carved by someone whose name, whose god, and whose voice disappeared completely leaving behind only the shape of what they once believed.